As a reminder, if you want to speak to any of the agenda items, please come to the podium and be brief, direct, and stick to an agenda item, please. The first item on the agenda is 2.1, traffic flow at Ridge Elementary.
Thank you, Mr. Lochley. Ridge, amongst several of our schools, we've got some issues with parent pickup lines and the queue lines getting excessively long. Sometimes that's a more tenable, acceptable situation. It's a challenge, but if you're on quiet subdivision streets, it's more workable. In the case of Ridge, we've got probably upwards of 60 cars that are parking out there on field span, which it's become a safety issue. It's also an access issue for those folks trying to take the east-west street across from Ridge. So mid-June, the sheriff's office was kind of looking at some of the options in terms of what could be done for the traffic flow. They gave us a group of recommendations. I want to say there was 5 or 6 options. Late June, I shared those with Miss Rhonda over there at Ridge, the principal. She kind of looked over them. She'd been out on summer vacation. She came back on July 5th, and she had reviewed those options from the sheriff's office, and some of them were good ideas. Some of them, they all had pros and cons. Most of them, there was a cost associated with them. Rhonda went and looked with her assistant principal, kind of looked at the situation, and they've given us another suggestion. And if you know what the school looks like, if you're facing the school, the teacher's parking lot is on the right, and they've got a parent loop on the left. And what we're looking to do is, and this is with the support of Rhonda, Transportation's looked at it, we're looking at switching those two. We're going to run a queue line of cars through the teacher's parking lot. The teachers are going to be aware of this. We've got cones ordered, and we're going to run the buses through what used to be the parent loop. We've had Transportation go out and look at it to make sure the buses can go through that queue. We're actually I think Mr. Bordelon mentioned that we went out for bids today on some concrete. It is a bit tight, especially for a 72 passenger bus, the long buses. But by putting the turnaround loop there and running the queue line of cars through the parking lot, we think we can save some money. We'd like to take a look at that as an alternative to get those cars off of field span. We think it's a good idea. We got a principal that has boots on the ground, knows what's going on. She's notified her administrative team. Miss Aloisio has been working with her to make sure we get the communication out via maps, pace calls. The school's got a Facebook, flyers. The meet and greets are coming up in early August for the parents. Kindergarten testing, we're going to get the word out to those folks that we're going to look at flip-flopping parents and buses. I know Miss Rhonda had sent me a bunch of signs that we had ordered. I believe Kyle mentioned those came in today. We got posts for those. We'll put those in place in the next week or so. With a little luck, we get the bids on the concrete, and we can share that with our bus drivers, walk them through the process. Trying to think, anything else I'm leaving out, Mr. Bordelon?
Mr. Broussard. I want to thank everybody who worked on this. It makes sense. I, of course, know exactly what Mr. Craig is talking about, knowing being Ridge is one of my schools. And, you know, I want to thank Ms. Dickerson for taking the time to look at it and going, I don't want to say the most cost-effective way. She basically is saving us a good bit of money. I think it'll work. I want it to work. It needs to work. These cars parking on field span, you know, I was told they're not parking. Well, just because you're not getting out of a vehicle doesn't mean you're not parked in the middle of a highway that leads into a state highway for 30 to 40 minutes every afternoon, you know, parking there an hour before school lets out. So I hope the switching works. I hope the communication with the parents works. And I would hope the parents would start trusting the system in our transportation department, not meaning it the way that just sounded. Trusting the fact that we have bus transportation from your home to school, and we don't need 60, 70, 80 parents bringing, kids back and forth to school every day and parking out there an hour behind. Let our bus drivers and our transportation department do their job, and that in itself would bring the risk down of these parents parking in the middle of a highway, because an incident I know of firsthand, not right at the end of school. A person I know very well was headed home, coming from Judy's Middle, going to Ridge and Golden Drain, and a line of traffic coming from Percy Bork, Sellers Road, the opposite direction from the south. A car came into her lane for a good portion, and they almost head on when the car turned into the car wash to avoid hitting her. This situation is a disaster waiting to happen. And I appreciate everybody within our system, transportation, Mr. Bordelon's department, maintenance facilities, for working with Ms. Dickerson and doing this in like a 1 week time frame or less. It's really appreciated, and I hope our community grasps what we're trying to do, and allow us to work with them, and they work with us. And I just wanted to say thank you.
And I just give you one last detail. By Miss Dickerson working through this, we're thinking we've gained about 950 feet in terms of parent queue, and we're hoping that'll get 50 cars off the road, and that we can resolve this problem.
I hope once the parents see these 50 cars in a parking lot and there's a lot of space on the road, they don't start picking their children up and think we got room to put 50 cars back on the road.
I think
as we're building the wing at Ridge, not knowing, I don't even know if we know where the wing's going to go to remove the portable buildings. Maybe somewhere in there may be an option, to do something to not let a problem like this occur again. If we have extra room or so forth and so on, that we can maybe expand parking lots or do something while we're doing this construction out there. I'd sure like to take a look at it, because something tells me the problem will not 100% go away. I don't think it will. I'm not that naive, but I think, thank you people, I think we took a big step in making it a little safer, for our children, our parents, everybody involved with Ridge, and that's the bottom line of this. We don't need an accident, even if it's a fender bender. We do not need that. Thank you.
It's great. What can we do to appeal, or Mr. Bordelon, Damon, to appeal to the parents to use our transportation system that we spend millions and millions of dollars on to try to satisfy the public? And we have established satellite stops, but the satellite stops is not at capacity, and we acting as an Uber driver. And then we look at the overall picture. I don't know if this project is cost efficient or what it's going to cost us, but we are strapped for finance in with everything we're trying to do. So maybe we can appeal to the parents to use our transportation system rather than trying to cause confusion at the school of picking up their kids. I know their children are the most precious jewel that they have, and we love them just as much as they do. But all the parents piling up at one time, and it's not just Judy's. I'm not just talking about Judy's elementary. Most of our schools have that problem, and we would surely love to have more consideration from the parents to use the bus system that we pay millions of dollars for to transport our lovely kids.
Mr. Broussard, if you look at it, a loop was built around J. Wallace James, and a loop was built around Prairie. And do you know, in the afternoons, with all the cars looped around Prairie, you still have cars blocking Congress today? still today, with all the work that was done and taxpayer money spent, and you know, the Prairie District is not that. Now it is a school of choice with French immersion, but with everything there and what was done, you still have cars parked down Congress towards Rue-de-Bellier. I was called about that just at the end of last year again. So I mean, the school system took a big step forward, you know, and it I don't know how long it lasted that we didn't have traffic on Congress. Did we ever not have traffic on Congress once this little loop was built? So I think this is going to be an ongoing problem, but I like the fact that we're trying to, you know, we're taking the bull by the horns and trying to make things better.
I agree. And I said, Judy's is not the only school we're having challenges with. We're having challenges with Alice Boucher, J. Wallace James. I mean, we are backed up from J. Wallace James from in front of the school almost to university with the loop. So and everybody's trying to solve the problem. So you know, everybody's on board. I'm just asking the parents to try to be more cooperative in what we're trying to do to get our loved one to and from school in a safe manner. Is there anyone here to speak in the audience that want to speak on this agenda item? Any other board member? Just a recommendation, Mr. Craig, that you're going to look into it. There's no final decision as to what you're going to do. So motion to bring this to the full body, need be or need not be. All right? Good enough. 2.2, overview of preparation for the opening of school.
So I will kind of piggyback off what you just said. You know, without a doubt, last year transportation we certainly had challenges. We had a lot of things going on. We had new software. We had a new school zones. We did decide to cut back on the number of satellite routes, and so we certainly had a lot of changes, and I'd be the first one to say that we could improve that. And I think if we do improve that, and that's what we've been working towards all summer, I think the parents gain confidence in the system and are more likely to put their kids on the bus. So that being said, there's an attachment. I apologize to the public. That was added about mid-afternoon today. I believe they're going to put it up. I've already shared this with a couple of media outlets. I've met with the transportation department, I want to say 2 times throughout the summer for comprehensive meetings. I sat again with them for an hour and a half today, and what you'll see attached is kind of an overview of the items we've been discussing. I'm going to just, without reading through it individually, I'll kind of go through the different topics, and if you have specific questions, I'll try to answer those for you. If not, I have some staff here to help us with it. The first being the route bids. Last year, a huge change from last year was with the last minute changes we had last fiscal year, last school year. We didn't bid routes till literally this week, a year ago. And so we were already behind the 8 ball in terms of bidding routes. This year, the routes were posted in May, and the bus drivers bid their routes in late May. The bus drivers now have their routes. They've had their routes since late May, early June. They can look at their routes on a Google map. They can look at them in the Versatrans software. They can see what they bid on, and they can actually go out and run those routes now, either in a car or they can run them in their bus in the next week or so. Contract drivers can run them anytime and get an idea of what's going on. Now, that being said, those routes, they're still subject to change. Not necessarily whole schools changed, whole neighborhoods changed, but as new kids register, especially in particular those elementary kids where we provide transportation 0.2 miles from the house, bus stops are going to change. In general, the schools won't change. We'll continue to monitor that, but in zone routes in particular, I'm referring to, they're really not, the schools aren't going to change, the times aren't going to change, the stops may change depending on how a school's enrollment and that bus's ridership, how the demographics of that neighborhood change. Right now we have 258 total routes. 211 of those are regular ed, 47 special ed. And when I say special ed, that includes the gifted. That was problematic for us last year when we implemented having gifted services within 0.2, 0.4, and 0.6 miles of a student's home. So those are already in place. We've been using Google spreadsheets to report where parents can request the transportation. They've been working with the supervisor of gifted and talented education. All of our gifted kids have morning, afternoon stops, bus driver name, bus driver contact, and we'll actually send that to the parents. I want to say we're going to send that out on the 18th. Am I correct on that? Yes, ma'am. So all the gifted is taken care of. Likewise, we're doing the same thing with the ESL, and those were problem areas for us last year. So we're already ahead on those kids, and we're going to be sharing those. What happens was the parents report with the assistance of the gifted and talented supervisor. The request is made on a Google document, has an email attachment, and we'll be emailing all that. We've got a cut and paste letter, form letter, that we're sending to all those parents on the 18th with the gifted bus route driver information. We currently have 43 contract drivers, 215 board drivers. It changes a little. If I'm not mistaken, I think a contract driver came in today and said he wants to go board. So potentially we're going to have to lease a bus. We'll have to make that adjustment. But we're standing at about 43 contract drivers today. The mileage on the average for those routes is about 47.6 miles one way. Those bus drivers can, is that one way or both ways? One way? One way? It's an average, yeah, but okay. So that's above the breaking point for those folks to make their costs. I understand diesel and operational costs tend to trend upwards, but at 47.6 miles, based on the feedback we had last year, they can make their costs and make a living off of that. And of those contract routes, 28 of them are between 40 and 60 miles. We have, I want to say, 3 outliers above 60. You're talking about gifted and special ed services there, and we got a couple, I want to say maybe 6 that are less than 40. There's a tendency of the drivers to kind of know what route they want. In general, not always, but in general, most of the people are pretty satisfied with their mileage. I had a couple calls over the last week and a half about the existing. We did several stops last year for the daycare centers and Boys and Girls Club. We did not take those stops away. We just rolled those over. So routing is working on giving us those. The bus number should stay the same, maybe a different driver, but the service will remain the same from those schools that we were servicing, those daycares and Boys and Girls Club, and that'll continue for 2018-19. There's always turnover. We had 4 contract drivers retire. That's the next heading. All of them have been replaced, so we'll maintain about 43 contract drivers, 45 contract drivers. We have, talking about the substitutes, and I got some recent information this afternoon. We currently have 42 active substitutes in the database. That being said, there's probably only about 17 that want to work consistently and every day. And in the rest, they like to do AM or PM, or they'll only want to do Karen Crow School, or they only want to do West Side schools. But we have a cadre of substitutes. We had a CDL class on May 9th. We had 23 individuals complete the class, and we have another CDL class scheduled for the 23rd, and at this time we have 28 people signed up for the class. So we got a group of substitutes out there. One of the tricks for the transportation department is there's I guess a sense of reliability for a bus substitute, that we don't necessarily need them every day. And so what happens is if you can't use them consistently, they tend to find other jobs, or when you finally need them, they've found another job and they can't drive that day. So we'll always kind of battle of that, but going in, we're going to have a large number of active subs. Better yet, we have about 8 retired drivers that are very good, consistent drivers, and they like to drive a lot. They're willing to, they know our schools, they know our buses, they know our principals, and so we'll rely heavily on those. But we also have new substitutes available for the upcoming year. It's come up before. I want to say about a year ago we talked about the number of bus drivers on leave. I had 10 down this morning. It looks like we have 8 drivers currently on medical leave. If none of them had releases to work on August 8th, we have those routes covered with reliable subs. We're hoping that some of those folks, they'll be seeing the doctors in the next week, 2 weeks. We're hoping that some of those folks get released so they can come back on their routes. Bus attendants, we have 74 full-time bus attendants. We have 2 out for various reasons. We have 6 available bus attendant substitutes. In general, those bus attendants, we got about 13 on the pre-K routes, 13 on the routes that are active in terms of student discipline. Most of the bus attendants are on the special ed routes, 46. And then we actually, some of our biggest satellite stops, 6 of them, we have bus attendants that go in the morning and the afternoon just to assist at those satellite stops. Trying to think anything about substitutes. The big thing, there was a tendency that the phone system was overwhelmed and they'd leave a message, they wouldn't get a call. Part of that was a technical difficulty that we figured out in October that still was unacceptable. Board action back in June added 2 additional clerical assistants to that office to answer questions. Miss Shannon and Miss Takir started, they were hired in June. They began on July 2nd. They are actually internal employees. They were in the schools. They've come to the central office. They know JCampus, which is our database. They worked with the Versatran routing software, so they're comfortable with that. We've been showing them how to use the phone systems up here. They're getting to know the people to contact, and for the most part they work on transportation, but they're learning the system, learning the names, getting the word out. One thing that was an issue for us, and that was kind of related to our non-exempt employees, which clerks are, is our typical working hours are 7:30 to 4:30. Well, if you ride a Truman bus, you're probably not going to have a bus issued till about 5 o'clock. And there was nobody in the office. They'd gone for the day. Likewise, if you're a Thibodeau student or any high school student, your bus is rolling by 6 in the morning. And the principals knew to call me. They knew I was available, and the bus drivers knew I was around. Me and Joey and Damon would talk frequently in the morning and afternoon, but the public didn't necessarily know that. So one of the ladies is going to be working 5:30 to 2:30, and one lady will be working 8:30 to 5:30. So they'll be working their hours, but and the ladies have decided who will work what. They may switch. But that way, when the phone rings at 6 o'clock in the morning in transportation, where's the Thibodeau bus or where's the Acadiana bus, there's somebody there that's already on the phone receiving calls from bus drivers and from parents. The call center, 521-RIDE, Miss Cece's been working on that for the last 3 or 4 weeks, actually probably all summer. That goes into effect on July 25th. On July 24th, we've been kind of playing around with it, checking the numbers, making sure everything works. But we'll do kind of a big call in. We're going to find everybody that's got a second, and we're going to call transportation that day and see if we get an answer, and if those temporary workers who we hire for that 3 or 4 weeks in late July and early August, that they're answering the phone right, they're reading the script. They certainly don't know the answer to the question, but it's important that they get the message correctly so that staff in particular can route that to the right person or give them the right answer. So ultimately, when the school year gets going, Ms. Shannon and Ms. Takir will be in the transportation office. They've got their own phones that'll roll over. They'll have computers to access Versatrans. They'll also be able to track all. It's actually a software called Issue Track, but we'll be able to track complaints. We already do a good job of tracking accidents, violations, moving violations, but we'll be able to track all issues in terms of calls that come in. Both the ladies have been shown how to report an issue, report an incident in that software, so that we can monitor that for the board. Ultimately, but it's starting out for the school year. Ms. Cece, one of our veterans in terms of working with transportation, is going to have one of the new clericals down there at the call center, so as the calls come in, they can route those calls immediately where they need to go for. And again, that'll open up on July 25th. Satellite stops, one of the first things we had the new ladies do, they contacted the different satellite stops, the folks that let us use them for satellites, and I had some numbers. I apologize. So the ladies have contacted all the vendors and store owners, parking lots, in terms of using those satellites. We've had a couple that didn't respond to us. In particular, I think there's a satellite stop out there at a car wash on Ridge and Rue de Bellier. We're having a hard time contacting that person. So some of them are vacant's not the right word because somebody owns it, but we're verifying. I think we have about 30. How many people? 148 satellite stops. 114 have been verified. 34 we're still kind of trying to get a final answer. And actually, most of those folks, everybody's still comfortable with us using their locations. And they actually were appreciative that we called just to verify that we're going to be using their location. So the 23rd is Monday. Staff is coming up with a simple Excel spreadsheet that'll be posted online that'll list all the satellite stops, the bus driver, the schools that it attends, the places where it makes stops. That'll be a user-friendly document. We're finalizing and making the last minute adjustments on that document. It'll be posted on the board website on July 23rd. We're still working with one or two parochial schools, trying to make some adjustments. One of the schools down in the Broussard area, we'll make sure we'll have good coverage there. We're trying to provide additional bus services to one of the other parochial schools. We're going to meet with those folks later this week. Burke has that dual immersion program. That's logistically been kind of an issue for us in terms of its location and satellite stops. Actually had Miss Pippin in Magnet Schools. We ran a list of the kids involved in that program, and working with Miss Pippin and Miss Trosclair and transportation, the kids there's just not a satellite stop close to those folks. We've called them, asked them what are their wishes. It actually turns out the folks that lived in the Broussard-Youngsville area, they were parent pickup car riders anyway. So those folks know going in that there's really not a close stop. Otherwise, the kids on that list, we contacted those parents and let them know where the closest Burke bus stop is, or it turns out we have some ESL down at Burke, and routing was able to connect those parents with which stop we could accommodate those kids. It's not satellite transportation per se, but it's getting those it gets those kids. They may ride an ESL bus, but if they can get to that ESL site, or if they can get the closest Ridge site, which we pointed out to them, we can provide them a level of bus service. In terms of the technology in the department, E-Link, we have E-Link is where you go on the website and you ask for your bus driver, you key in an address, it'll tell you what bus driver, where the stop is, the time. That's up and running. We have we lost a few tags this year, but we've been working with MIS, and routing is making sure that those kids will all be by Monday, have a bus driver, a route, and a time. Most kids do, but you get new registrants, you get address changes, you get kids that weren't in a school of choice but are now in a school of choice, vice versa, transfers for whatever reason. We're going through those kids hand by hand to make sure that they're assigned a bus driver and a route appropriate for their school. GPS is installed on all buses. I think we had, with the retirees and the new additions, I think we had somebody put GPS in today. July 19th is the deadline to have GPS installed in all units. The camera vendor is coming in on July 23rd to do a camera maintenance check on all our buses. Make sure those are, do some basic maintenance, make sure they're all up and working. If you'll remember, the board approved the Wi-Fi for downloading camera footage, and one of the concerns as we were kind of looking at that was Wi-Fi downloading video footage, how much web space, how much of the internet that would clog up. It turns out that we've talked to those vendors a couple times. It looks like you don't necessarily record every camera all day unless you specifically want to do that, but we're looking at the drop-offs for buses, the pickups. That's typically when things happen. There's also, if you're not aware, whenever the bus driver's driving and an incident happens, for want of a better word, there's a panic button, and if you hit that panic button, it automatically bookmarks that part of the bus footage, and then that can be connected to the Wi-Fi, and it automatically downloads that moment 30 seconds after, a minute after, when that bus driver hits that panic button. So the vendor, when they're coming here next week to do the camera maintenance, they're going to do a Wi-Fi test pilot on some of our buses. The big schools with long bus lines, Acadiana, Lafayette. Acadiana's not so bad because everybody kind of parks parallel to the building, but Como, they line up way down. Lafayette High, they're front and back side, they're everywhere. If Wi-Fi can't pick those cameras up, I've talked to Daryl in maintenance. He can put some Wi-Fi hotspots out there that'll pick up that information. We're planning on moving forward, but we want to make sure that technicalities of it are worked out, that we can truly download footage, and the upside of all of that is staff doesn't have to go from school to school collecting SD cards, and that we can download that immediately or within a half a day. Staff has set up a bus video folder for every school. Staff can drop that video clip into the folder. The principal can access it. The AP can access it. Is there something the kid did wrong? Is there something the bus driver did wrong? And we can expedite how quickly we investigate issues that are recorded by the cameras. We talked this morning, parent portal. Parents typically use that for attendance and grades, homework potentially. Parent portal will also have the bus information when you go there. Bus drivers in service next Monday the 23rd. That's a big morning. We go over all the different expectations and guidelines for the upcoming year. And I kind of mentioned earlier, gifted bus service has already been established for, I think it was 495, 500 kids. So those folks will get that information July 18th. ESL is sharing their information with us. Currently we have 55 requests, but we'll keep working. Again, we're not reducing the number of stops. We're tweaking it to account for 0.2, 0.4, and 0.6 mileage from the home. So we'll keep tweaking with ESL. Special ed, a lot of those program supervisors have been out this summer. They're returning to work towards the end of the week. We have 70 requests right there. We have the same number of buses, and we really know where the IEPs were. When the IEPs were completed last May, we really know what the service is. We just want to make sure we accommodate the special ed needs. We're talking on the, I guess, the more challenging lower end of special ed. And probably the big thing that comes at the last minute, and we haven't quite resolved how to do that, is Truman's pre-K. That ends up not really getting routed till the last week, and you're looking at 400 kids, because those kids, you know, they typically pick pre-K programs in their home zone. And when it gets down to it, those are full, or parent chooses to register for Truman pre-K. That's about 400 kids that really going into that last 5 days, 10 days before school starts, transportation has to route. Now those buses are already routed all over the parish. What happens is you get basically door-to-door service for pre-K, and so we have to look and see. So the buses are already going into the neighborhoods throughout the parish, down the rural country roads. They're going everywhere they need to go. We just need to know the specific address to drop those 400 kids. That's it in a nutshell. Yes, sir.
I have a couple, well, one or two questions for transportation. I'm sure you all know by now, bus drivers contact me on a weekly basis, daily basis. They like me for some reason. I like them. It's okay. A lot of bus drivers evidently live in District 5. A lot of contract bus drivers. One of the questions I was asked, are all of the bus routes fully updated and ready to go as they will be at the start of school, as far as I want to say regular ed, or you know, just our regular bus routes, not maybe the ESL or special ed, but as far as our regular bus routes, have they all been updated completely?
So, in zone routes, really they should be set up. I kind of prefaced it early in the meeting.
Okay.
As residents change, they do.
Okay. Okay. Because you know, I had gotten there was some concerns when the bidding was going on that some of the routes were not completely 100% updated, were the routes accurate or what they bid on, so forth and so on. That was just questions I was getting, that, you know, I'd let a lot of the bus drivers know we'd be having a facilities meeting during the summer.
I did have one, and I'll turn it over, I'll let Dane speak here in a moment. I did have one or two drivers contact me in the summer. I guess if there's somebody that's saying it's inaccurate, or there's a concern that it's inaccurate. I know the two cases I dealt with, they sat down with the routing specialist and we had it resolved. I don't even remember the circumstances, but we can resolve. If there's something going on, we would ask that the bus driver contact me, contact transportation, so that we can validate the concern or make the correction as necessary. This
was a few weeks back, and you know, I guess before the 4th, and I had written the question down. I just wanted to ask it. And the other concern I had, maybe while you're there, I had two parents call today, said they called transportation a few times to ask questions and got no answer. I don't know if the phones were busy. I helped them best I could. One, I got in touch with Mr. Craig, so it's no big deal. I didn't know if it was simply today they had called or last week. I know we're shutting down on Fridays early.
So the one I talked to today, I actually did. I had all of transportation with me at 9 o'clock so that we could do another final planning.
That might have been when
when I talked to the gentleman, I said, what time? And we were in staffing. In fact, by the time I spoke to him, staff had already answered his question. Good.
And that I'll just bring it up. They asked that I bring it up, so I did, and I'm glad to see that. I told them it's probably a good reason, but I'll ask just the same. Go ahead, Mr. Evans.
I'll address Mr. Lochley. The routes as we bid it on the 23rd, 24th, and 25th of May were all correct. All the changes that we had done, the spot rezones that we did for Lafayette High and for SJ Montgomery that actually went to West Side and Acadiana was all in routes. All the information that we had at that point in time, with all the changes that we had with the reversed immersion and everything else, we put into routes. Everybody was told this. Now, every single route in this district can change. Every route. Sped route, an end zone route, a special ed route, anything. You know, any kind of thing. Now, on those particular changes, as we get them into the office, we do change them on the route. It's normally not a new if it's schools of choice, it's not going to change on where you're picking up. It's just going to say, I have an extra student, and all we have to do is just put this student in, make sure they're on that particular route, and let the driver know. Some things on like gifted is under the special ed umbrella. We have to pick them up, as close to the house as we can get to them within the 2, 4, and 6/10. If we get a new student, it's automatically going to change the route no matter what, because we may have to put a stop pretty close to their house. If we have to add a stop, it automatically changes their routes. But as of when we actually bidded, everything, all the changes that we had up into that point was in the routes.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because we need to, the parents. We did rezone. We took back children, kids, students from, Willow Street area, Azalea Park and stuff, going back to Acadiana. So I'm sure, I don't know if their buses will change, or they'll just change from going to Lafayette High to going to Acadiana. I don't know how many kids, from, I don't know where the bus routes were, but I'm sure we may, Mr. Broussard, we may get phone calls concerning that. I'm going to tell them call 521 RIDE now that I know the day it fires up, and I fully maybe expect a phone call from those parents, just being there. They were at Acadiana for 40 years. They went to Lafayette High for 1. Now they're back at Acadiana for another 40.
Yep.
So, okay. But I'm glad you mentioned that, because that was something I had thought of that I'm sure is going to go pretty smooth. I mean, they're just going back. They were only going for a year.
Yeah,
so
they're going back home.
They're coming back home.
And those particular routes, the only thing that actually changes, we're actually keeping the same buses on the routes. The drivers might be different because we actually bidded everything, so it might be a little bit different driver, but the whole entire neighborhood is picking up on one bus and they're going back to their home zones.
Oh, trust me, I heard about the buses staying with the routes.
Well, that's the best way to do it.
Trust me on that one, buddy.
We
bus
want
number
to
2 is staying where bus number 2 was.
We want to confuse the parents as least as possible.
Trust me, like I said, I get lots of phone calls.
Mr. Hidalgo.
If a route changes, how are the students or the parents of the students who are going to be impacted notified? So let's say a route changes, and so now instead of the bus getting there at 6:59, it won't get there till 7:20, or a totally different bus at a totally different time. How are those parents notified?
That's more of a routing question than what we do. When we actually say we have to add a stop, anywhere is on the stop, and it's right in the middle of a route. When we actually add it in, the computer system that we have actually takes over and reroutes the bus, and it actually drops down the times. So say we were adding one particular stop at 6:55 in the morning. Anything after that, it actually changes for the rest of the route, and we don't automatically notify parents right from there on, but it goes in the E-Link every time we change. So if we make a change today, tomorrow it'll actually affect those changes, and it'll change the times on E-Link. So anybody checks after that, they'll be able to see it's a little bit later in the mornings, a little bit later in the afternoons.
I understand that it could get real tedious and very difficult to notify every parent every time there's a change, but it's really problematic if you change a bus route, and now instead of being picked up at 7:20, you're going to be picked up at 7:10, and you're not out there at 7:10, so you missed the bus. That's a problem, because that's not their fault, and it's really not their problem. So we have to figure out, are we going to tell parents to check the routes every day for the first month of school, or whatever it takes, because last year I got several calls on, the bus didn't pass this morning. Well, yes, it did. It just passed 15 minutes early. Well, how the hell am I supposed to know it passed 15 minutes early?
Yeah, in that particular scenario, if we do make a change to it, it'll actually be, the bus should be a little later rather than earlier, unless we make a sweeping change and drop like 5 or 6 stops or something like that. In that case scenario, that's a different story. We'll let the schools know and say, hey, look, this is a drastic change to this particular route. We may have to alert parents, and that we can actually take one step further and say, look, we got to go to the school, let the schools know, they can call in, we can give them new times.
Is there no efficient way of, we know who's on what bus? For the most part, we should, based on the system. Is there no efficient way to we have PACE, we have email addresses, I would imagine. is there no efficient way to say if there's a change to this bus route, everybody on that bus gets a notification somehow?
We can actually pace or Mine 101 the whole entire district, which is problematic. The schools, when we actually get to the schools, they have it to way that they can pace message just their school, and if it just affects that particular school, that's a much more efficient way of doing it. We can affect just that one school rather than 44 other campuses.
And I was just going to echo that sentiment. We'll be speaking to the principals next week at the administrators conference. I got principals that use this Remind 101, Text 101. That's probably the most efficient way. It's easy for them to sign up. It just comes across on your phone, and I'll reemphasize that. I'll get with staff again in terms of how we communicate significant changes. It's a little difficult for like these little 2-minute changes, but significant changes in terms of using Remind 101. A lot of people don't have email. Those that have it, it's nice. You read it. It's better than a pace call. A lot of people, I'm probably one of them. When I see 521-7000, I typically don't answer it. So Remind 101, and we'll share that with the principals next week, that it's really important that you get your parents to sign up for it. So then you say, bus 64, major delay, or bus 64, back it up 15 minutes. And so when you see your kid's bus, oh, I need to make that adjustment. If it's not your bus, you can ignore it. And Remind 101 is probably the best way to communicate those types of changes.
And then I don't think it would hurt to put a notification on every piece of public information that we put out that says, hey, we transport 20,000 students every day, twice a day. I would encourage you for the first week, 2 weeks, whatever you feel it takes, check the system every day or 2 days, just to be sure. There are going to be changes to transportation, because you said you were riding the bus, but now we find out you're not, or vice versa. That changes the route.
We'll do that.
In notifying the parents if there's a change, I mean, will this fall on the school? Because I'm going to be straight up honest. Last year when we were having the fun we were having at the beginning of the year, some of the schools and the clerks felt a lot of the notifying the parents, or this bus wasn't running, or this bus didn't have a bus driver, or so forth and so on, was falling on the school at the end of the day, which is causing a little stress on their staff. Will that be done from transportation, or will you call the school and say, hey, you're going to need to put out a pace message, bus 64 is not running today, or bus 64 will be a half hour late, or so forth and so on? Are we going to throw that back down to the school, or are we going to take care of that in transportation itself?
Well,
as far as the pace call, can we gear transportation to where these schools are separate in the pace call system, or is that, or can that not be done? I mean, I'm just asking a question.
Ms. Lochley, the only way we're actually set up right now is to send out a pace call or a Remind call. A Remind call is to everybody.
Everybody, okay.
The whole entire district, and that's upwards of 120,000 people.
Okay. I mean,
and every day that we have some kind of issue, or there's a bus change and this driver is picking up instead of this driver, we usually call the schools, and we send emails to the schools as a verification.
Because I know what they're saying. You get a pace call. Most people probably don't listen to the majority of them. And I'll tell you a funny story, make you laugh. I was at Acadiana one day, which I am all the time, and Miss Hyatt at the time asked if she could borrow me for 5 minutes. She said, we're having a problem getting information on our pace call. People they're telling us they're hanging up the minute they hear, Lafayette Parish school system. Mm-hmm. So they had me get on the pace call and do like I was doing on Friday nights. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. And I read the pace call. And she said they got more response from that pace call, because it was a different voice, it was a different setup, and it was a familiar voice. Mm-hmm. Because they couldn't get their information because people wouldn't listen to pace calls. Yep. So I can understand the frustration that if we send it out as a system and it doesn't get to the parents, is maybe they're not listening to the whole message, and could maybe in school correspondence on the little newsletters we send home to maybe put a important reminder at the bottom, listen to these pace calls that we're sending out the first month of school, because it may be really important information that you're just hanging up on or not, not listening to.
We find, specifically from the schools, and with feedback from the schools, the Remind 101 text messages work far better than a PACE message, because they'll get a text message, and then that text goes to another text down the street, and the word spreads much quicker than a PACE.
And one thing we did last year, we hired a replacement individual that works with the bus drivers and works with the schools. So is that, and it was late in the year, but as that came online, the gentleman, as the bus drivers would call in, or somebody called in sick or canceled out or had a mechanical, he would send that email to the principals, and then the principals, kind of like Damon mentioned, we really need those principals to utilize that Remind 101, because they can get that word out quickly. But with James back there in transportation, taking the information from CC and Charity, he gets the word out to the schools, and the schools get the word out to their parents. And he's doing a good job.
I know last year at the 11th hour we threw something at you to cut $1.some million. And we were short of drivers, we were short, and then with all the rerouting and stuff, it was hectic. Look like we've got it together now, but it's always going to be some wrinkles that we are going to, some wrinkles we're going to iron out, and I know y'all can handle it. But I'm going to ask that in light of the student pickup and all the satellite stops that we put in place to try to accommodate as many students that we can, when the smoke clears and the dust settles, that we look at these satellite stops and try to eliminate the ones that are not needed. To not save to save money would be the wrong thing to say, but it's unnecessary stops. If the kids are not there, if the kids can move a block further down the road to or from, would be more accommodating to what we do, and we'll transport these kids at a much safer manner with a shorter mile or shorter time span. So I would ask, not gonna put on there for the to-do list, but I would ask that your department look at that and try to operate as efficient as we possibly can.
That's our goal, sir.
Mr. Broussard?
Yes.
James, could I ask you a favor? I'll give you my number, or you can get it off the website, or maybe y'all have it in transportation. Could you put me on that text thing when it goes out?
Actually, you'd probably need your school. He doesn't actually do the Remind. You need to get your principals to put you on the Remind. You sign up for their Remind.
Just at the beginning of school, just to get it so that I have good knowledge of it, so I can explain it to the parents. That's why I go in my schools a lot. If you see it firsthand, it makes it a lot easier. So I'm going to ask a couple of my schools to put my phone number in that list so I get the text. So just better acquainted with the system. Thank you. Mr.
Lochley, just a word of warning: you're going to get every single PACE message that they send out. If you do that, it's a text, but it's a Remind 101. If they have a bake sale, you're getting a bake sale text. If you
this is just like for the first month of school, okay?
you can then sign on.
That doesn't bother me, because my wife gets upset when my schools have fundraisers like barbecue chicken or po' boys, and I didn't buy them, because that means that's we got to cook. So maybe it's not a bad deal, but I might be getting 10 or 20 of them a day.
Yeah.
No, it would just be for the first couple of weeks, just to see what it looks like.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. James, don't put me on that list. Thank you.
Thanks, sir.
Next, 2.3, the update on portable building relocations for summer 2018.
Good evening, everyone. Kyle Bordelon, Director of Planning and Facilities. I've included in the packet some information for you to let you know. It's been a very hectic summer for us. We've returned 14 leased classroom buildings. That's going to save the district somewhere in the neighborhood of about $168,000. And we've relocated 20 school board owned portable classroom buildings and 1 school board owned portable restroom buildings. As of today, We have almost 10 of those, 20 that have been relocated, that are almost ready for a final inspection. And we're diligently working on the remainder of the buildings to get them connected. Everything's in place. The buildings are in place. We're working to install sidewalks, handicap ramps, covered sidewalks, hook up the electrical, internet, fire alarm, and intercom systems. So if everything keeps going as planned, we'll have everything connected and ready for and occupiable by the time school begins.
So, hold on. Did the student population increase at Live Oak Elementary?
I can't answer that. Maybe Mr. Craig can answer that
The
question.
pupil-teacher ratio changed there.
Or
So,
because of the new program we putting in?
because
Or
of,
that's not part of that?
no, because of their school performance, so we
Okay.
gave them a lower pupil-teacher ratio, which added additional teachers requiring additional rooms.
And Myrtle Place as well?
Myrtle Place we swapped out some leased buildings for some board-owned buildings.
I see.
Go ahead.
I see on the AC unit we are 99% completion in the on all of the schools for the AC. We had 18 that we were doing.
Oh, you talking about the next agenda item?
Oh yeah, well, yeah,
Oh.
yeah, I'm sorry, I'm looking at
Still on
it.
this.
Yeah, I'm ahead of myself. Okay, all right. This so we're on our way to ridding ourselves of all the portable buildings.
Yes, sir. We have one double classroom leased portable building right now left, and one portable restroom building left.
For somebody else, I mean, at least
Leased from a
everything
different.
else that we belong.
Everything else belongs to us. Yes, sir.
But it's
One
a
question.
dollar amount for a portable building for 5 years. Just one portable building for 5 years.
Roughly $60,000 for 5 years,
And a wing.
sir.
We can do a wing for 60,000. Okay.
Can we what?
Can we build a wing?
Oh no,
Yeah,
absolutely
okay.
not.
Okay.
No, sir.
All right. Mr. Lachele?
I would guess we're gonna do this as we build the wings at Ridge and the schools we're gonna be starting here soon. The portable buildings we'll be removing. Those, the better portable buildings we have in inventory, will we be taking, I'm gonna use Acadiana as an example. Some of the portable buildings we have back at the cafeteria, the trailer park back there, I mean, some of them shouldn't even be there anymore. I mean, they're the ones we talked about in the tax campaign, are coming from UL from World War II, the silver ones back there. Will we exchange those out? You know, if we move portable buildings out of Ridge Elementary in the next year, can some of the better maintained ones go to these schools and swap them out? Because I don't think we're ever going to lose that area at Acadiana. I don't think so. They'll stay there for.
To answer your question, is we will make every attempt possible to swap them out. There's a believe it or not, there's a lot of factors that go into that. The footprint of those old silver buildings is smaller than the footprint of these other buildings.
Right.
So to say we're going to swap it out doesn't always work out that way, because a larger building fitting in the same spot as a smaller building,
Right.
you start getting you crowding up on how close you are to the other buildings, and there's a certain amount of space that has to be maintained around the perimeters of building for emergency situations.
Okay.
But we will try to swap out buildings if at all possible.
Yeah, I'd like to look at that, because I mean, some of them we have at some of these schools, they've got somehow, some way they got to go. But I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay.
I remember these. Yeah, I remember these buildings at Acadiana High when the kids were. They're pretty old, and it might be cheaper to tear it down where it's at than to try to haul it away.
We affectionately call those gray ghosts because they just never go away.
All right, that's it. Last agenda item, 2.4 project status update.
Okay. What you have, the printout, the spreadsheets you have, I obtained this information from our accounting department just last week, and I did, as you'll see, it's divided into the different funds that money is in for the different projects. So Fund 80 is a capital improvements fund. Fund 58 is a 2016 construction bond fund. Fund 59 is a bond fund for Southside High, and then lastly is a self-funded construction fund. I took the list of projects and went through it and tried to divide it up amongst those projects that were completed, which you'll see first in the listings. Then the next section is projects that have had some type of action on them so far, and then the next section is requiring some, actually is a fourth section. The third section is where we need to make some action happen, and the fourth section is new projects for projects that were just approved. The money is available July 1. So this is a total listing of all the projects available or have funding available, and I've also tried to alphabetize them to make it a little easier to read, or if you're looking for a particular project in your district. Mr. Broussard, in answer, you had a question about the air conditionings of the gyms. We have, out of the 18 projects, 14 of those are either completed or near completion, and we have 4 projects that should be completed by August 1st. There was a delay in the shipment of equipment from the manufacturer, from the Train Corporation, on some of the units. So that's why those 4 projects are slightly or finishing slightly behind the others.
It would be nice to note that that project came in under budget. That we still got to have $2 or $3 left over. So, you know, the many times you get thrown rocks at for coming back and ask for some money, you know, every now and then we say thank you for 1 or 2 things. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
You know, Mr. Bordelon,
Mr. Broussard, that whole project, it did come in under budget. We used the available reserve monies for La Rosen. We added La Rosen to the project list because we were sending kids back to La Rosen. We needed to air condition the gym, and we are air conditioning the what will be the robotics center at the W.D. Smith Career Center with those available funds also. So it is coming in under budget. We're adding 2 more air-conditioned facilities based on that total budget.
Yes, you know, that's what I said. We get we get blamed for spending money unwisely, and a few times, many times, I said a few times, the many times we do, the public don't know about it. So every time I can throw some accolades out, I will, to let them know that we're trying to do our job. We're spending our taxpayers' money wisely. And we spoke, Mr. Lochley, have anything? Sir. You have anything?
Yeah, I just had an FYI for Mr. Bordelon. We spoke on the phone the other day. Near the bottom, see where I'm at. New projects approved for FY19 under self-funded construction. You remember I asked you about the front driveway for Acadiana?
Yes, sir.
They have another one, 100,000, resurface road around school.
That was the back. That was the back driveway.
I think that's the back, the one we were talking about.
Yes, sir.
We were both on the, I'm going to say in public, we were both right. We knew it was there somewhere. There it is.
Yes, sir.
Because the other one is doing good. The loop around the front, I think they were supposed to start, or they're starting asphalt today or at the beginning of this week, and they moved very quickly on that, that's one of those projects that you've got that window, and even with the weather. But yeah, I appreciate you putting this together, and I know as time goes on, you'll tweak it, so forth and so on. But like we spoke over the phone, I like having this at our facilities meeting at least once a quarter. Just as an FYI, you know, for us, we get asked by our schools where a project stands. We don't have to constantly call you. It's right here. We can reference it back. I appreciate the work you put into it, and a lot of the questions my schools have, it's either going out for bid, didn't go out for bid, exceeds the money allocated, almost completed. I appreciate the work your department and you put in on this for us, and like I said, if we can have this every so often just to look at and let us know where we stand, it makes it easier when we get asked the questions.
Yes, sir. No problem.
Thank you.
And with our conversation we had a few days ago, if you know everybody want what they want now, it should have been completed yesterday. If you would correspond with them a little bit more, than, you know, beyond pushing the button in the computer that say this project is received, and put it in a category that says we'll get on it today, tomorrow, next year, or this is the process, so we can let them know. Well, you know, they call me up and say this hasn't been done, but it's a process.
Yes, sir.
And they may not want to know the process, but I think it's best for you to let them know the process, that it has to be bidded out and all kind of other stuff. Take some time to do these bigger projects.
Yes, sir.
So,
Thank you.
All right. That's it? If there's nothing, it's anything, but it's because I've got to ask, does anyone in the audience have anything to say? If there's no other business to be brought before the chair, we call this a meeting adjourned.